wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking all about your guest lists and how to make them. How to make a guest list. I get a lot of questions on where to start when creating your guest list, who you're supposed to invite, what the sort of etiquette is here. So we're going to break that all down for you today. Before I get started, I just wanted to say, if you haven't seen it yet, I also have a blog. So if you're the kind of person that prefers written content or likes to have things printed out for your planning or anything like that, I do have a blog called Ivory in June. I will link that in the description below if you want to take a look at that, and I have additional wedding tips and advice content on there as well. To start making your guest list, the easiest way to start is to just grab a piece of paper and sit down and just write down all the people that are close to you that you can think of in that moment, and have your partner do the same. So you want to start with your family members, obviously mom, dad, siblings, and then kind of branch out from there and go to your mom's mom, dad, siblings, and then do the same on your dad's side, and again your partner will do the same. Once you have the immediate family done, and then depending on how many people you intend to have at your wedding, the size of your venue, and your budget, that will determine how far out to go when it comes to extended family. And this is where parents come in handy a lot, especially if your parents are paying for a large majority of their wedding. There's a good chance that they're going to want to have a say in who is invited. Once you've written down your initial list of your close family and friends, hand it off to your parents and see if there's anybody that they would add to the list. And this doesn't mean that you have to add every single person that they add, just so you know. But if they are paying for a large majority of the wedding, you're probably going to have to let them invite who they want to invite as well. Once you've written down all of your close immediate family that you want to invite, this is when you can move to friends outside of family, friends that are in your immediate circle, so friends that you talk to and see on a regular basis. This could be college friends, hometown high school friends, work friends, church friends, anything like that. Go through each group of your life and pick out the people that are closest to you. Once you have done this and your partner has done this, combine the list and do a quick check-in and see where you're at as far as numbers go. Then you can know how many people you have left to invite or that you can invite, and branch out into more of those friends that you want to invite you weren't sure if you had enough room for, or this is where you realize that you are over capacity and you need to cut back. So just some tips when it comes to inviting guests from different walks of life. For extended family, again, this varies based on every couple, so you'll have to choose the route that is right for you. If you're going to invite one aunt and uncle on your mom's side, but she also has other siblings, there's a good chance that you're going to need to invite all those siblings so that you're not creating any sort of family tiffs. People get sometimes sensitive about weddings for whatever reason. So just keep that in mind, and again, consult with your family members, consult with your parents on who exactly is important to invite and who you need to have at your wedding. A question I get asked a lot is, what about estranged family members? So this could be anyone from a father that you don't have a relationship with that much to an old grandfather that's not really in your life anymore. And what I always say to this is, you're really the only one that can know the answer to this. So if it's somebody that you really don't want at your wedding, you think they're going to cause issues, you think that it's going to make your mood any less elevated than it should be at your wedding, you should be at your utmost happy and positive self. If it's somebody that's going to ruin that for you, maybe don't have them at your wedding. This is totally your call. It is your wedding day, and if it's going to create any additional issues that you don't want present at your wedding, it's okay to not invite them. I have had to serve as buffer duty, as I call it, on several weddings. So this is something that if there is somebody that you feel should be there, but you're a little bit worried about family drama that might ensue or anything like that, have a conversation with your wedding planner or whoever's going to be a point of person on the wedding day, so that they can be on the lookout for any bad behavior, or maybe if you have somebody that tends to drink a little bit too much, make sure that there's somebody there that can kind of keep an eye on this and be able to talk to the venue or talk to somebody to have them removed from the situation if it becomes possible, or just give you a heads up so that you aren't surprised by any craziness that happens on your wedding. Another question I get asked a lot is, what about kids? Am I supposed to invite kids? Am I allowed to say no kids? Again, this really just depends on your personal preference and sort of your life and who's involved in your life. And if kids are a big part of your family, your extended family, or if a lot of your friends have kids, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to get away with saying no kids at all. So First of all, don't feel obligated to invite all the children, and you have to provide meals for them, and that's you know, and then they're included in your guest count, and that's extra money. So don't feel like you have to invite everyone with kids, but just recognize that if there's a lot of people that are on your guest list that have kids, there's a good chance that a lot of them might not be able to come, and not everyone has easy access to a babysitter or the funds for a babysitter. So just keep that in mind and don't take it personally if they choose not to come, if they can't bring their children. Going off of that, if you do want to have a completely kid-free, adult-only wedding reception or wedding ceremony for that matter, just communicate with your guests that have kids. If you have a wedding website, or even on your invitation, put something like adult-only event, call up the babysitter, kick off your shoes, we're gonna have a fun night. You know, something that's fun, that it doesn't sound like you're not allowing them to bring their children or make it a personal attack on themselves. I've even had a couple of weddings where the location is not necessarily safe for children. It's close to a river, it's close to somewhere that a kid could get into trouble in some way or get hurt, and to just communicate with your guests about that and let them ultimately make the call. They'll likely make the call to not bring their children so that they don't have to keep an eye on them quite so closely, or be concerned about these dangerous items or locations at your wedding, and that way you don't have to be the one to say, don't bring your kid. Another thing that I've had several couples do is to actually hire a babysitter that comes to the wedding to watch the kids that are there. So say you have, maybe 10 groups of friends that have kids, so they have 10 kids with them, and you want to have 1 or 2 teenagers or college kids or whoever it may be to kind of keep an eye on these kids, and have a specific table where they can go, have kid activities, coloring books, something like that, where they can have things to do throughout the wedding so that they are being watched over, but the parent can also communicate with them if they need to. They can check on them, they're there, but they don't have to be overly concerned with their whereabouts the entire time of your wedding. So the question, they invited me to their wedding, does that mean I have to invite them to mine? So if this question comes to light for you, ask yourself 2 questions to answer it. 1, do you still see them or talk or hang out? And this could be in any capacity, whether it's a work friend that invited you that you still see pretty regularly, but maybe you don't see them outside of work, or have you seen them or hung out with them face to face in the last 2 years? Typically, if the answer is no to either one of these, then you don't have to invite them to your wedding, even if they invited you to theirs. If they got married 4 years ago and you haven't seen them since, don't feel the need to invite them to your wedding, because chances are they're not a huge part of your relationship and who you are as a person and how you got to this wedding day, so there isn't any big pressure to have them at your wedding. Okay, let's talk about plus ones for a second. So first of all, plus ones are not a given. Plus ones are not necessary or expected. You don't have to give every single person on your list a +1, especially if you're in a location where you have to keep your guest count down because capacity is lower than other places, or just for the sake of your budget. When you think about it, every single guest that is going to bring a +1, that is doubling your guest count, which means it's doubling your budget because you're essentially paying per guest for your wedding. So if you are trying to cut back and be smart about your budget and limit the number of guests that are coming to your wedding, only give +1s to the people that are really close to you, that you know their significant other, or those that are in a serious relationship with that significant other. So if they're engaged, if they're married, if they have been with the person for 6 months to a year at least, those people can have +1s. Don't just give +1s to guests that are going to find a date just for the wedding, because they're going to be in pictures that you might see later, and if it's not something that's serious, then what's the point? And also you're paying per guest. So if it's not somebody that has an impact on your life or somebody that you know closely, you're probably not going to want to spend the money to have extra guests there that you don't need. When it comes to inviting guests outside of family members, a lot of couples don't realize how much of your guest list is actually going to be comprised of family members, and a lot of people, especially when we're younger, I feel like we envision what our wedding reception is going to be like, and it's going to be just a ton of our friends, and be a big old party, and then you get down to inviting everybody on your guest list, and all of a sudden you have 125 people on your list, and they're all family. So keep that in mind when you're building your guest list. Family probably comes first in most situations. Not everybody, but in most situations you're probably going to want to make sure that your family is prioritized in who is in attendance at your wedding. You can always have engagement parties or parties afterwards to invite all of your friends and have that sort of a celebration. but definitely prioritize your family. In addition to family members, when it comes to friends, there's probably people that you always envisioned would be in your wedding or at your wedding growing up or throughout high school and college, and then you get to your wedding day and you realize, I haven't seen or talked to this person in 2 or 3 years. And if that's the case, just because you always thought they'd be at your wedding doesn't mean you have to invite them to your wedding. If it's not someone that has made an impact on your life or that you're not even close to or you haven't seen or spoken to much in the last 2 years, you don't need to include them on your wedding guest list. Okay, so let's say you followed all of these steps, you've gotten your guest list written out, you have yours, you have your partner's, you've combined it, and whoops, you're totally over capacity. Now what? So here are some tips to bring down your guest list if you need to start crossing names off before you've sent any of your save the dates or invitations out. Here are some tips on how to narrow it down. I've mentioned this already, but if you haven't seen that person in at least 2 years outside of family that might live out of state that you still have obviously a relationship with, if you haven't seen them or communicated with them in the last 2 years, scratch them off the list. Remember, you are paying per guest, and this is likely upwards of $200 per person when you consider food, drink, dessert, chair, silverware, place setting, all the things that go into what you need to provide per each guest can get close to $200. $200 per person. So when you're going through a list, just ask, when was the last time I saw this person? When was the last time I talked to this person? Would you see them in the next 12 months if you weren't planning your wedding? If you didn't have this reason for them to hang out with you, would you see them outside of this? Would you go and get coffee with them? Would you go have dinner with them? That sort of thing. Would you foresee spending time having a relationship with them if it wasn't for your wedding? If the answer is no, they probably don't have to be at your wedding. Finally, I advise my clients if they're having a difficult time to break up their guest list into an A list and a B list. And obviously your guests don't need to know if they're A list or B list, but this can just help in your brain to know anyone that's on an A list is an absolute have to be there guest. So as you're building your guest list, consider who's an A list and who's a B list, and if it gets down to the point where you need to cut back on some guests, you're just gonna look at your B list rather than having to look at the entirety of your 300-person list or whatever it may be. An important thing to remember also is people suck at RSVPing. This is something that I've learned over the years, and no matter what happens, there's always a struggle to get people to RSVP. So keep that in mind. Set an earlier RSVP date than you even think that you would need. I always say around 2 months or so that you're able to give your caterers an accurate guest count and all of that good stuff. There's a chance you're going to have to hound down some people for RSVPs, and it's a lot easier to have a wedding website or an online link so that if you need to send out a mass text or whatever, you can send it out to these people. All you have to do is click a button, click another button, and they're RSVP'd. I find that if you are providing, even though you're providing the RSVP card right in their hot little hands and they've got a stamp to just cross it off and send it in the mail, people will not do it. Or it'll get lost, it'll get thrown out, or it'll sit on their counter, it'll get buried by other mail, whatever happens. Digital RSVPing seems to be a little bit easier. It's also easier to manage afterwards. You don't have to import any of your responses. You don't have to worry about things getting lost in the mail or getting delayed in the mail or anything like that. Just throw it up in your wedding website and you can track it a lot easier. Whew, all right, hopefully that helped you a little bit with building your guest list. There's some do's and don'ts, and hopefully I give you some tips on if you need to cut back on your guest list, the best practices to do so. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, comment below if it helped you out, turn on the notifications bell so you don't miss any videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.